Saunders, and he's going to do the history of the Macedonia church and the graveyard. Chris is a local historian, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and say a little bit about himself, and we'll go on with the program. Chris.
Thanks. Not really a whole lot to tell. I'm just a local historian. Been researching the local area for probably 25 years or so, primarily around the Burlington area. But I've gone farther into Ironton, Proctorville, and then after a while I got kind of specialized in the local Underground Railroad, and I've researched that for about 15 years. I've worked with PBS, taught classes on the Underground Railroad at University, spoke at the National Freedom Center in Cincinnati, so been around a little bit, and it really still surprises me that people want to hear what I got to say. So anyway, with that having been said, let's see if we can get this underway. So, does everybody here know where Macedonia Church is? No? Okay. You do? Fantastic. All right. Well, this is it. If you go down 52, you get down to where Sam's and Lowe's, all that is. That's Macedonia Road there on the left where that new car wash is. Turn left, going out that way. You come to a fork in the road, make a left there, and come on out to another fork in the road. It sits right there. Man Canyon comes up right beside it. And if you go on out, you'll drop down onto Buffalo. So it's kind of it's out there a ways. Definitely secluded. So in order to be as accurate as possible, I use newspaper clippings, court records, interviews, pictures from the time. I try not to change anything. As you all know, as far as if you're researching stuff with genealogy or anything like that, something can actually hinge on the meaning of one word. So if you change that word, you can actually throw other people off who are trying to follow you. So I use just exactly the way that it says. So what is a church? During this presentation, it's important to remember that a church can be a building, or it can be a group of people, or a congregation. So a church is not one specific thing. During this presentation, all three definitions will be used. And here you have Merriam-Webster's dictionary, where we talk about a building, or a body, organization of religious believers, or a congregation. So all of those things are what a church is. So Macedonia Church, the original motto of the church was "The Lord has blessed." So in 1798, Fayette Township was brought together. It was named in honor of the Marquis de Lafayette. So then in 1799, the African settlement of Macedonia was established, and is about 2 miles outside of Burlington. Moving forward, in 1813, the Macedonia Church congregation was organized. Originally, the members met in each other's homes. One publication says it is the first black church west of Pennsylvania. Now, I've not been able to either confirm or deny that, but I did find that in one publication. In 1816, December the 20th, so you'll have some people say 1816 or 1817, Lawrence County was established. And it was formed from Scioto and Gallia counties. Burlington was established as the first county seat of Lawrence County, and it was named for Captain James Lawrence, who uttered the famous phrase, "Don't give up the ship." Still kind of a semi-motto for the U.S. Navy. And Burlington was named after his birthplace, Burlington, New Jersey. Incidentally, one of the ships that he was on captained was the USS Chesapeake. So in 1834, the Providence Anti-Slavery Missionary Baptist Association, of which Macedonia is a member, was organized. Ministers who had been driven out of the Tees Valley Association in and around Cincinnati over the slavery question, they all came together. These individuals met in the Providence Church, and one is reported to have said, "It is by the providence of God that we have met." Now, Joseph Davidson, who was a reported Underground Railroad conductor, expressed his support and donated a half-acre of land for the erection of the church. Actually, he sold it for the sum of $1. Eli Thayer, who was an abolitionist and was the founder of Cerrito, which was an experiment in abolitionism, he reportedly donated the wood used to build the church. So you have a group of people here all coming together for one common cause. The church building was made of batten board, the first church, and that's the kind of lumber used to build barns, as most of the members were very poor and could not afford finished wood. The current church is actually the second building. When the current building was completed, the initial one was so small it was actually used as a corn crib. So who were the first members? Well, most of the first members had been enslaved and had been set free in Virginia by their owners. So you're going back to 1799 in that time period and moving forward. Miss Callie Barnett, whose father-in-law, Reverend Nelson Barnett, was pastoring Macedonia with her husband-to-be when they were children, and they walked through the woods, now Huntington, to Kellogg, West Virginia, to the Ohio River. Now, Kellogg is down in the west end, that's Piedmont area and out near Spring Valley. On the bank of the river a post stood with a bell to ring, and a raft-like boat would ferry them across the river to the mouth of Buffalo Hollow. They walked from there to the top of the hill to Macedonia. This was in the years of 1880 to 1882. At this time, there was a membership of 125, and many came from the tri-state area. Yeah, 125 people. And they're traveling from all over. I mean, this, as you can tell, I mean, this isn't just, going to church wasn't something you go a couple hours, you go home, take a nap, go back in the evening. No, this was a whole day affair. So who were some of the other founding members? Now, in 1826, John Ward of Pittsylvania County, Virginia, manumitted 133 of the individuals he enslaved. In the history of Pittsylvania County, it is stated that 70 of Ward's freed slaves were resettled in Lawrence County, Ohio. This group predates the better-known 37 by 22 years and appears to be the largest single influx of formerly enslaved individuals into Lawrence County, Ohio. So a lot of people have heard of 100 of the 37. The 33 have been all but forgotten, and they were here 22 years before. Now, I actually went to Virginia. This has been a couple of years ago, and I got the manumission records from all 133 of those individuals. I brought them back and transcribed them all. It took me like 2 months. But I have them on here, so if later on somebody wants to see what the manumission records were, no specific first names and descriptions, I have them and can provide them. But these are the surnames, last names of those people who were enslaved by John Ward. Adams, Allen, Bobbitt, Brooks, Callaway, Craddock. Now we will come to this one later that says Craddock there. You will later see it as Craddock, C-R-A-D-I-C, Craddock. Dudley, Farmer, Greenhill, Henry, Hodges, Johnson, we'll talk about him. Jordan, Lynch, they will be mentioned. Mundell, Powell, Randolph, Roberts, Shelton, my personal favorite because it's just fun to say. Tentera, Bogus, Tolbert, Tucker, Ward, West, and Williams. One of the great warriors of Providence, William Patrick Craddock, left the following story. I was born in Lawrence County, Perry Township, 7 miles above Ironton, on May 8, 1835. My parents were Jefferson and Judea Craddock. My father died when I was 2.5 years old. I was converted and united with the Macedonia Baptist Church back of Burlington. I was baptized by Reverend Thomas N. Stewart and was ordained in 1866 to pastor Tridestone Baptist Church. This is the founder of Tridestone Baptist Church. I pastored there for 16 years, and the membership grew from 12 to 217. I was a member of the Providence when some of the members started the Mount Olive Association in West Virginia. I was with the Underground Railroad, and it was only known to those engaged in it from Gallia, Lawrence, and Jackson counties. Our business was to hide and render assistance to those seeking freedom from slavery. I have in my possession a copy of the papers made by John Ward and signed by the clerk of Pittsylvania County Courthouse, Virginia, on April 7th, 1827, to free my father. The history was signed by William Craddock. The last time Reverend Craddock's name could be found in the minutes was in the 1890s. So I started looking. Obviously couldn't find, he had his father's freedom papers, but I'd already found them and transcribed them some years ago. So here they are, his father's. At the instant, he was listed as number 95, not 95 103, but 95 in the book. At the instance of John Ward and Lynch Dillard, executors of the last will and testament of John Ward Sr., deceased, duly and proven and recorded in the court of said county, Jefferson Craddock, a man of color, emancipated by the said will, was this day numbered and registered in the clerk's office of the said court pursuant to the provisions of the Act of Assembly, in that case made and provided, that said Jefferson Craddock is a son of Lewis and Winnie Craddock and is of bright complexion, 5 feet 3 3/4 inches high. It's cut off there, but it says he has no scars or marks, which was often written on there because, they didn't have pictures of people for identification, so they would often, if they were trying to describe an individual, they would describe their skin tone or any other identifying marks, whether it's a scar, birthmark, height, any of that kind of stuff. Crooked finger, any of that. So, some of the Underground Railroad conductors associated with Macedonia Church. Reverend William Stewart. He just mentioned he had been baptized by Reverend Stewart. From 1840 to 1860, preaching the colored settlement at Burlington and Macedonia. Led large numbers of self-freed individuals over the hills through dense woods to Poke Patch. Poke Patch was once named Stewart Settlement. And it was also known that if people were, say, slave catchers were to chase people into Stewart Settlement, they were making a grave mistake. John Stewart, I believe it was his brother, taught singing in day school on Macedonia Hill in 1848. Philip Lynch worked at the number 2, which was in one of 3 hotels that was in the Commons, the park in Burlington. He was described as a shouting Methodist who ended his prayers with a unique phrase, "Dog my cat by the land, amen." And he was one of the 133. Gabe Johnson, along with Jim Ditcher, assisted over 300 people to freedom. 300. Later attended Quinn Chapel, AME Church in Ironton. Right here, just right down the street. He has a stained glass window in the sanctuary, contains the name of him and his wife across the bottom, still in the sanctuary, and he was one of the 133. Moving forward to the 37, you have Thomas Walker Fry, who was the foreman of the 37 when they came here, and he was also the founder of Mount Pisgah Church in Proctorville, among other places. He actually was kind of a circuit riding preacher of sorts. He went around kind of sowing churches. I mentioned Gabe Johnson there, so if you would like to see what an actual manumission record is, that's just a copy there. Just pass that around. and it's been transcribed there at the bottom, easier to read. This is, that's Thomas Walker Fry, and it talks about Mount Pisgah Church. Other notable members, the Reverend J.M. Riddle, who was born enslaved in Virginia. Some of these, I love these stories. This first one is just karma. I mean, it really is. He was born enslaved in Virginia, was sold away from his mother at 6 months of age, but was reunited with her after slavery was abolished. He attended school in Virginia and received a quality education. Later, he became the first African-American magistrate in Virginia. When his former enslaver lost his mind, Reverend Riddle committed him to an asylum. Yeah, could you imagine? You're walking in here and you look up, oh boy, you know it's not going to go well. Dr. Isaac Bryant was born and educated in Virginia. He was heralded as being the greatest teacher in the tri-state area. Dr. Bryant was fearless and at one time walked into a mob near the courthouse in Huntington and prevented the mob from killing a black man who was accused of killing a white. Dr. Clayton Powell was born in Virginia and came to Ohio. He wanted to marry a school teacher but was rejected because he was illiterate. This inspired him to seek his education. He graduated from Howard University and became one of the most well-known and respected of the Christian community. His son was A. Clayton Powell, congressman from New York. So he went from literally being turned down because he was illiterate to he became a doctor. The 37th Cemetery, that's just about a block from Sam's Club. They're behind Little Caesars. So the exodus of the blacks from Virginia to Burlington in 1849. This is in the Ironton Register, March 5th, 1896. In the fall of 1849, 37 slaves were set free and moved just above our town to Burlington on a farm purchased from Isaac Frampton. They were owned by James Twyman and were manumitted by him in his will in the county of Madison, Virginia. The farm purchased for them was about 640 acres, hill and bottomland, with one large frame house and several small tenant houses on it. There were 20 males and 17 females. Some of them were old men and women who had given the best part of their lives in toil for their master in the accursed bond of slavery. The bowed forms, hard callous hands told all too plainly what they had undergone. The best part of their lives had been given for someone else. When the news was brought to the servants from the big house to the quarters that old Marse had set them free and that they were to be taken to Ohio, where a home and land was provided for them, a home in reality, they could hardly believe the news was too good. The mothers looked upon their children and thought, can it be that these sons and daughters of mine will be free and not have to toil as I have done, without recompense, without hope? Glory to our Heavenly Father, it is too good to be true. But true it was. And before long, they were on their way to the promised land, big and little, old and young, carrying with them, like the Israelites of old, their little belongings which they cherished from their old Virginia home. The journey was made in fear and dread, fear that something might happen to prevent them from reaching the haven of rest, dread that some shrewd lawyer might pick some flaw out of the papers, that they would be remanded back to await the tedious motions of the law's delay. But nothing intervened to stop them, and by they came to the banks of the Ohio River, the barrier to the freedom which they had long known of, but had never seen before. One of them informed me that he thought it was the sea, and their wonderment was great that they looked upon the mighty river for the first time in their lives, and thought, how was it possible for anyone who run away to ever get across its swollen stream? My informant also says that at this time a steamboat came along, and their wonderment grew, and they could not see enough of it. It was something that they had never heard of in their inland home, a moving house propelled by some invisible power, belching forth great clouds of smoke and steam, moving through the water as a thing of life. And many days after they had reached their home on the banks of the beautiful Ohio, did they clasp their children close as one of those monsters breathing fire and smoke went rushing. It was rushing by with the rapidity of the wind, and it was many days before they got accustomed to them. So here you are, you have people that are coming here and everything else, and the first thing they think, they see a boat coming by, and they think it's pretty much a fire-breathing dragon. They're clutch, never seen anything like that before. Well, it goes on. So the guy was about 11 years old. And he talks about it was this unwavering faith and trust in the Lord which enabled them to endure the horrors of slavery so long, and these hymns enlighten them. And he goes on and he talks about this William Traveller Smith. So this is William Traveller Smith on the right-hand side, or left-hand side. He was a foreman of the 37. Fry traveled throughout Lawrence County planting new churches. He preached at Macedonia Church, founded Mount Pisgah in Proctorville, and was a founding member of Tridestone Missionary Baptist in Ironton. And his wife was named Charlotte, which is, if you're familiar with the Burlington area, you may have seen Charlotte Lane. Charlotte Lane is named after his wife. This one I'm not going to go into. Trying to read all these but this is a guy by the name of Lewis Brooks from 1896. He's telling the story of his life, and he came here from Richmond, and then he had been his family were held in a slave pen and sold there, and then he ended up living out back of Proctorville. So he would have been right there in the Mount Pisgah area. And he was also involved with the Underground Railroad, so that would have been one of the conductors in that area. So this is the James Twyman Plantation in Madison County, Virginia. This is where the 37 were enslaved. Beautiful place, actually. And that's it just a few odd years ago. So James Twyman, he freed 37 of his slaves in 1849. He gave them $10,000. Actually, that's kind of misleading. He gave $10,000 to like 34 of them, and then there was 3 females that split another 10 amongst them. They come to find out they were related to him. The $10,000 was worth $367,182 in today's money, and he gave them other provisions for their care. 30 came to Burlington, 3 were invalids who were cared for in Virginia, 3 women remained in Virginia, and 1 named Washington is completely unaccounted for. No idea what happened to him. It is unknown where James Twyman is buried, as he does not have a marker in his family cemetery. It is rumored he was buried outside the Twyman family cemetery because of his decision to free his slaves. His heirs were quite upset. 37 slaves is worth quite a bit of money. So this is some of the other part of the plantation there. This is some of the 37 and their descendants. This was actually picture was taken in 1909. If you walk out the door from Walmart, from the not the produce side, the pharmacy side, and look directly across the highway, you'll see this rock formation. Very pronounced there if you're familiar with that area. And here, that's where they took this picture. This is a monument put up in honor of the 37, put up a few years ago, and that sits in the Burlington 37 Cemetery. Moving forward to Macedonia Church, coming back to the church again. This is 1868. Now remember, this is 3 years after the Civil War ended. Macedonia is an African settlement 2 miles back of Burlington. It was a scene of great activity during all last week. A colored Baptist association met there. A score of African divines from far and near were present. On Macedonia Hill, the pulpit was erected, and here, day after day, they poured forth their simple and rough eloquence to large crowds. Some of them were accomplished ministers and could fill with satisfaction and profit more pretentious pulpits. Others, however, recently from the chains of slavery, spoke in uncouth phrases but with power and vigor. Last Sunday, between 1,000 and 2,000 people were on the hill. Now, this is, remember, a historically black church, right? And we're always taught that black is over here and white is over here. Once again, between 1,000 and 2,000 people were on the hill, half of whom were white. Half of whom were white. They created an immense stir. A dozen booths with their counters spread with ginger cakes and candies, cheese and bologna, lemonade and soda water preoccupied the most prominent places on the hill, and around these the sable damsels with their extremely polite escorts were swaying constantly. A great number of old aunties with bandanas encircling their royal brows were on hand, with many a soothing word for everyone they met. Perfect equality seemed to crown the entire multitude. White and black, side by side, sipped their lemonade or sat under the droppings of the sanctuary. The association closed its work on Sunday afternoon. The farewell demonstrations were enthusiastic. A general handshaking went on around the pulpit while the women kissed and re-kissed each other. It was a gala day for Macedonia. 3 years after the Civil War. So moving forward to 1889. This comes from the Ironton Register, November 21st, 1889. The colored people dedicated their new church at Macedonia on the 10th. And what was good about it was every cent of debt was paid when it was dedicated. The church has a membership of over 100. It is an old society, having been organized in 1834, and is the mother church of 5 other churches at Pine Grove, Ironton, Huntington, Catlettsburg, and Burlington. On the day of the dedication, 103 were raised. I'm assuming it's $103, were raised, and the church starts out its new lease on life, square with the world. 5 years later, it says, is October 25th, 1894. The colored folks have a fine new church built about a year ago. They certainly should be proud of it. So what you're finding here is this one is saying, this first one from 1889 is saying that it had just been dedicated in November of 1889. And here another one in 1894 was saying the church is about a year old. Obviously, it would have been more than the person on the bottom got it wrong by about 5 years, by a minimum of 5 years. But these two things right here date the church to its buildings to somewhere around 1889. Macedonia is considered a mother church of several churches in the tri-state. Second Baptist, which is Tridestone, in Ironton, 1865, Mount Pisgah, First Baptist of Huntington, First Baptist of Burlington, a church in Cerrito, which I could not find a name or a date for, and a Sabine Baptist Church from 1910. In 1894, the bell tower that people see there and really like, it was finally added in 1894, and there was a guy by the name of Jacob Mayo, who's buried in the cemetery just out past the church. The bell was bought and brought to the church from Cincinnati by Jacob Mayo. So now we know who's responsible for actually getting the church and getting the bell and bringing it back. Scoot forward till more recently, back in 2012. This is what happened to the inside of the church. This was October 26, 2012. Had some vandals break in. Well, as you can see, I have Church of Evil there, 666. They have a pentagram here. Well, it's actually a star with a circle around it. They didn't know enough to actually invert the star. And 666. They have a upside down cross and 666 on the floor. They also had Pac-Man, wasn't it? Wasn't it Pac-Man stuff on the walls? Yeah. So they had Pac-Man and stuff like that on the walls. So it really needs to be looked after. This is just some more of the report on the church that day. Basically, I've just summarized everything that was in the report. And incidentally, one other thing that of note, something that had happened there before. I personally had gone out there, and I actually witnessed the vandalism as well. But I'd been out there sometime before, about a year or two before then, and found a kitten. I don't know, maybe a couple months old or whatever. Someone had actually skewered it and stuck it to one of the trees there at the church. There were about 5 or 6 steak knives stuck inside the church and a butcher knife that had been broken off. But they had skewered it and left it. So there's some really evil people in this world, and well, we see evidence of them. People have asked about the inside of Macedonia Church. Unfortunately, it's very questionable as to how safe it is. When you go to initially enter the church, you're walking under that bell that Jacob Mayo brought here, and it's about 30 or 40 feet in the air in an old church that's not in the best condition. So, and to err on the side of caution, it's probably best that people not try to enter it. But as you can see here, I mean, you see the stoves and the pulpit up here, and at one time there was a picture of Jesus with an American soldier kneeling at his feet. You have the boards running down the middle there, to keep the guys on one side and the ladies on the other, to keep them separated. And then in just here most recently, in 2022, a historic marker was placed in one of the 2 cemeteries associated with Macedonia Church. And the marker actually references the second cemetery. Now, this first cemetery, just right off the road there, is where Jacob Mayo and his wife Nancy are buried. There's also a lot of places where the graves are sunken in and all that, but it really is if you like those sorts of things, old cemeteries and stuff like that, it really is a wonderful place to visit and just look around and let your mind kind of run wild. There's a lot of the graves are marked with just common field stones as well. But I like to go there and just look and just imagine, Macedonia Church, circa 1840, belongs to Macedonia Church, Ohio's first black church. Those buried include the settlers of the Macedonia Free Black Settlement, built by free people who assisted freedom seekers along the Underground Railroad. Also interred are soldiers from the Civil War's United States Colored Troops, most of whom served in the 5th Regiment, Ohio's first black regiment in 1863. The Polly family also rest here. Emancipated slaves, the family continued their freedom struggle when their children were kidnapped from the Ohio and unlawfully sold into slavery. Macedonia's extant burial grounds include this sacred site and another a half-mile north. And this is, once again, the motto of the church, the Lord has blessed. And that was taken a few years ago, and this is today. There is I recently got involved with a group from the LEDC, and there's a group, I don't know how many's in the group, there's quite a few, a lot of college professors and letters after their names and all that kind of stuff. just submitted paperwork to the Appalachian Regional Commission and stuff like that. So we're actually soliciting federal funds to. Well, no, not the cemetery. What this is specifically based on is there are 27 sites, underground railroads, specifically underground railroad sites in West Virginia, Kentucky, and Ohio. But we're looking at underground railroad sites, and first we have to see how much money we get and everything else. But we're looking in 3 different states and 9 different counties: West Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio. We're looking at Wayne and Cabell in West Virginia, Carter and Boyd in Kentucky, Lawrence, Gallia, Scioto, Jackson, and I forget the 5th one in. So, but we're looking at. There's people from Shawnee University. There's professors from Marshall. I mean, from up north, up in Dayton. So this is a pretty big. Yeah, if you have any, if you're curious or what have you, the person that's in charge of that is Marty Conley at the LEDC. Yeah, Marty, you're welcome. Yeah, like I said earlier, there's one publication that said it's the oldest black church west of Pennsylvania. So this is not just simply Ohio history. I mean, this is American history, period. Right. This one hasn't been used in I don't know how long. It's been quite a while, but I mean it's in disrepair. But one of the big things. I mean, even the windows. Bunch of the windows have been busted out and everything else. It's had to been boarded up, and that's not because anybody wants to do that or anything like that. I mean, it's out of necessity. Well, you saw what people did, what the vandals did to it there 10 years ago, and then the kitten I told you about was before that. Last time I was in there, those pews were in there. I think there were 2 stoves, an old piano, a pulpit where I got Jim's picture, and like he was, and a communion table, if I remember correctly.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.